Ah, yes. Look at this European city. Beautiful, narrow medieval streets untouched by both world wars. Absolutely beautiful scenic views. Ah, fuck! What the hell is this? Ladies and gentlemen, introducing the Praška Magistrala. What is the Magistrala, you might ask? Possibly the worst example of Czechoslovak and communist civil engineering one could imagine. Okay, so before crazy communist car-centric engineering, the Praška Magistrala was just like any other part of Prague. Two large streets built for pedestrians and horse-drawn carriages that ran through some of the most prime real estate in the city on a south-to-north axis, connecting Prague 2 and Vinohrady up to the Vltava River with a few turns onto other streets. Following World War II, Czechoslovakia underwent the transition to communism, and with this transition went all common sense and logic when it comes to urban design. See, the Czechoslovak communists loved car dependency so much that they almost entirely demolished an entire other Czech city, Ústí nad Labem, to make room for cars, parking spaces, and the ideal communist city in the brutalist fashion. As part of this paradigm shift, the 1970s saw Prague also get partially torn up to make room for cars, with medieval squares being turned into parking lots and with the construction of the north-south so-called Magistrala. This was achieved by using the right-of-way of the old boulevard that cut north to south through the city, along with the construction of a new, extremely ugly bridge that connected the new highway to the Pražský okruh, or ring road. A little side note, generally speaking, it was a trend all around the world in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s to demolish parts of cities to build car-dependent infrastructure, as oftentimes it was seen as the way towards the future. Anyway, the new highway, which got rid of the old pedestrianized streets, ran and still does run street level from around Muzeum and Václavské náměstí area to the Nusle Bridge near Venzigova Street. Ah yes, the Nusle Bridge, an eyesore on the historic skyline of Prague. While yes, there were plans in the works for a bridge connecting the Vyšehrad and Vinohrady areas in the city since the early 1900s, some of them looking pretty beautiful, the ideas for the bridge were much better and stylistic than what was built. Okay, this is actually kind of funny. During the testing of the bridge in 1970, the Czechoslovak army used tanks to test the strength of the bridge. Probably just to check whether or not another Warsaw Pact invasion could be conducted through the use of the bridge. Anyway, in the years after its opening, the Nusle Bridge was, how do I say this, quite the suicide hotspot. See, since the bridge was built to house a 6-lane highway and just a meter-wide sidewalk on each side, the engineers never thought anyone would actually have the novel idea of jumping off the 42.5-meter-tall bridge. Until they did. Yeah, now if you want to walk right next to a highway, you can, but don't expect any view of Prague Castle or the historic city below, because it's blocked by these pesky anti-jumping barriers. Oh yes, and the north of the Magistral isn't much better either. Want to admire the view of Prague's historical main train station? Too bad, there's a 6-lane highway, parking lot, bus stop, and signs blocking your way. Want to visit the National Museum or Opera? Too bad, it's literally an island in the middle of a fucking highway. Even the end of the Magistrala near Vltavska screws up the entire human feel of the city. The highway literally cuts through the center of the walkshed of the Vltavska metro station and tram stops. Okay, so after the fall of communism, people slowly began to realize that having a 3 to 4 lane highway with parking spots cutting through the very heart of Prague didn't make some of the most valuable real estate in the city that appealing. Even though the highway is 3 lanes in each direction, around 20,000 more pedestrians travel along the Magistrala each day than do cars. According to magistrala.eu, the area around and on the highway at Ipe Pavlova, a major transfer stop for tram, bus, and metro services, is the most polluted area in the entire Czech Republic, with carbon dioxide levels during the busiest weekdays reaching twice the maximum level at which emissions begin to affect children's psychological development. All of this from car traffic. Not to mention the fact that 80,000 cars per day driving between buildings in a city makes a lot of noise. Alright, so enough complaining. Currently, there's a project going on aiming to humanize the Magistrala, aka Prague City finally taking back public space for pedestrians and locals as opposed to commuters and cars. So yeah, it took until the 2020s for progress to actually be made in humanizing the Magistrala, thanks to lobbying by pro-pedestrian, pro-transport organizations such as Automat. Okay, so this is what was envisioned to take back the square at IP Pavlova, and this is what they got. Why is the city still giving concessions to car owners and commuters? Take a look at this. 18 parking spaces on this square for cars that would carry a maximum of 4 to 5 passengers each. So, concessions given for 72 people in exchange for the safety and health of 100,000 pedestrians a day. Not to mention the fact that pedestrians have only 7 seconds to cross the Magistrala out of every 3 to 5 minute light cycle for cars. Okay, so this is what IP Pavlova looked like in 2009, so compared to then, the square is somewhat of an improvement from the past. In 2023, there was a major feasibility study sanctioned by the city of Prague and conducted by Swiss firm IBV Hüssler that looked into making a new park at the demolished Těšnov train station and making the space underneath the Magistrala, which is currently just a bunch of unused land or parking lots, actually usable with things like parks and basketball courts. Essentially, the idea in the last few years has been to turn this terribly loud and polluting 3-lane highway into a somewhat pedestrian-friendly 2-lane high-speed boulevard, which isn't much better. Although adding separated bike lanes, pedestrian access, and revitalizing the parts underneath the overpass would be a step forward if it were to be approved by the city's districts. Okay, so at this point, I guarantee that some of you will be asking, oh, but Adam, what about the people who commute into or out of the city for work or who need a car to commute out of the city? You don't need a car if you live in Prague. I'm sorry, but you don't. Prague has one of the largest and most extensive public transport systems in Europe, with numerous bus lines, 3 metro lines and a 4th in construction, over 20 tram lines, suburban buses, and a vast commuter rail network expanding into the entire central Bohemian region surrounding the city. Want to go into the city? Park your car near one of the metro stations on the outskirts of Prague, and don't bring your polluting, noisy car that destroys city streets into the center of Prague. So my prayers have finally been answered, and Prague is actively developing its park and ride network at stations like Nové Butovice and Zličín on Metro Line B and Ladve on Metro C. The rates aren't bad either, with free 12-hour parking and 24-hour parking being 50 to 100 crowns depending on which station you park at. Or even better, use Prague's extensive commuter rail network to get into the city if you live in a village or city in the region surrounding Prague. What does the future of Prague's most divisive highway look like? Well, in January 2025, Prague 2 district, which is worst affected by the Magistrala, approved the first stage of transforming its worst highway into a boulevard. Wow, what an improvement this will be. Dedicated, separated cycling lanes in a city that hates cycling, and widened walkways with trees so that people don't have to bake to death in the summer? What's going on? Ah, shit. They're adding parking spaces. Way to go. Concede space to cars to incentivize people to continue driving into the city with new parking spaces despite the addition of pedestrian and cycling infrastructure. These improvements will extend from Fungerovo Square near Nusle Bridge down to Halpova Street near Václavské náměstí. Honestly, good for Prague too for taking a step towards the right direction. Until these infrastructure improvements are implemented, I will vehemently avoid the Magistrala. If you made it this far in the video, thank you for watching. Let me know in the comments below if you want me to continue talking about Prague's transit woes, or if you want me to cover another city. Thank you once again for watching.